Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We are super excited for the first ever Strong Bodies and Minds mental health panel. As we know, mental health talks have become much more mainstream, but a lot of students and athletes are left without the applicable and actionable insights that they can take into their everyday lives. So with SBSM tonight, we are hoping to give you some. Before we begin, I would like to let you guys know that you're welcome to take pictures, you're welcome to take video. Please, however, do tag us in our Instagram, Strong Bodies and Minds. We'd love to see the content that you take away tonight. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator tonight, Cornell University's Senior Director of Sports Leadership and Mental Conditioning, Greg Shelley.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for being here. It's a privilege to be here, and as already been stated, it's always good to get the real-world perspective on really important topics, and this is an important topic, and I'm anxious to hear what our panel has to say tonight. And so this is how it's going to work tonight, everybody. I do appreciate your time here, and you're going to have a time at the end for some Q&A. So if a question is burning and it doesn't get answered, log it in your brain, write it down, and we'll be passing around the mic at the end, and you'll have a chance to ask that question. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, give a little background from where they came from, where they're at, maybe a little bit about where they're going in the future, and then we're going to turn it over to a 4-minute video, and then we'll get right into some questions for the panelists. So I don't care who goes first here, but somebody start us off here. Introductions.
I can go ahead. My name is Katie Lever. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Texas at Austin, where I study NCAA discourse with a focus on sports policy and law. So lots of NIL kind of related stuff lately. I'm also a freelance sports writer, a creative writer, and head editorial for twoadays.com.
How's everyone doing tonight? I'm Blaze Riorden. I'm from Rochester, New York, so about an hour and a half down I-90. I'm a professional lacrosse player, and I'm currently developing technology to help make lacrosse a safer sport.
Connor Buczek. I'm the head men's lacrosse coach at Cornell University. Attended Cornell, played 7 years professionally, and retired a few years ago. So focused solely on coaching now. Great to be with you guys.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate, obviously, your time here and your expertise, and looking forward to getting into it here. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to a video to get us started, and then we'll get right into the program here tonight.
My name is Cameron Nichols. I'm a senior on the gymnastics team. I've been doing this sport for about 20 years now.
My name's Hannah Buczek. I'm a junior and I'm on the women's basketball team. And I've been playing basketball since 3rd grade.
My name's Julian Amaga. I'm a senior and I've been playing football since as long as I can remember, about 15 years.
Julia O'Sullivan. I'm a 5th year on the gymnastics team here and I've been doing it for 20 years.
My name is Mariah Bird. I do track, and I've been doing it for 13 years now.
Noah Downing. I'm on the men's basketball team, and I've been playing basketball since I can remember.
I think I've struggled with performance anxiety, especially when I'm younger, but I still see glimpses of it playing like in college. I think the first time I really could point my finger that it was anxiety was probably in high school. When I was a freshman, I kind of had to fill a big role coming in. So I think that was the first time I really felt anxious about a game and making sure I can perform well during it.
Performance anxiety has always been there for gymnastics. I tend to just think of it as nerves.
It's just such an element of this sport, the fact that you're striving for perfection. You're getting judged by people around you.
I've never labeled it as performance anxiety, but I'm sure that's what it is for the sport.
I would say the first time I really felt it. Like, I'm not really a person that gets nervous that often, but really the first time I felt it was in college because things mattered so much more.
I think my view on it has really changed in the last few years. I would say in club, it was something I always had to deal with on my own, kept it to myself. But in college, I feel I have become more comfortable talking about it, whether it be with my coaches or my teammates.
Before games, I kind of like to just stay to myself. Even if I'm feeling nervous, I kind of just deal with it myself.
I have been prepared to play a college sport. I do think like nothing can fully prepare you until you get there. So I think I did the most I could have to come to college. And even though it's Division III, like it's a lot on the mind and a lot on the body, regardless of the division.
Growing up from where I come from, like mental health and anxiety in sports are not really talked about as much. So it's kind of just like kind of get over it. So I think that's one thing I wish I had when I was younger.
Growing up in the sport of gymnastics, it's honestly been a lot more how you perform physically than how are you doing mentally. And I would definitely say growing up, my coaches weren't always the most supportive. I always relied on teammates, friends, parents, family. They were more my support system through this journey, and they always looked out for me.
Growing up, I think my parents and my coach were all very supportive of my mental health and me as a human rather than me as an athlete.
I would say in terms of performance anxiety, I'm definitely comfortable talking to my teammates and my coaches about it. I prefer to do that rather than kind of keep it to myself.
For me, I prefer to keep it to myself, which probably isn't the best thing. But like I said, for me personally, like growing up from where I grew up, like it was kind of just the thing to do, kind of just, be tough, kind of deal with your own thing. So.
I've gone to see people like Shelley, who's like a sports psychologist professional, when like basketball's been the root of it. But other than that, like the professional advice has been something I've gone to as I've gotten older, and it's been super beneficial for me.
Mental health, big topic, arguably maybe the most important topic we have in athletics right now and for the last few years and for the foreseeable future. And our title tonight, Strong Bodies, Strong Minds. We're going to transition right into it here, and the phrase mental health will come up. Different aspects of mental health will come up, just like you saw in the video. And again, I just want to remind all of you, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and we really encourage you to be a part of this towards the end here. So here we go. All right, strong bodies and minds. Strong bodies and minds. How do you develop a strong body and a strong mind?
That is a great opening question. I would say, I completely forgot to mention that I'm also a former Division I athlete in my introduction, so I do have some experience in collegiate athletics as well. And I would say in developing a strong body and a strong mind, you really have to, start early, I would say, on both of those things. And that doesn't mean necessarily that like you have to decide when you're a little league baseball player that you want to play that in college, but it just means making decisions that are going to support you as an athlete and as a person as early as you possibly can. Especially with mental health, I think we really tend to focus on mental health, especially athletes, when we're in a moment of crisis or when things have already gotten really bad. But it's important to look at mental health as something that's holistic, as something that it starts the second you're born and it will follow you throughout your entire life. So investing in your mental health is just as, if not more important than investing in your physical health. And I think a lot of athletes, we're really good at being driven, we're really good at pushing ourselves to do that extra rep. It's not as easy to invest in the mental side of our sport, but it really is just as important as the physical side, and it's important to get started on that process in making sure you're mentally strong and you're making those good decisions for your mental health as soon as you possibly can. That was something that, as an athlete, I got started on way too late, because I waited until I was at a crisis point in grad school where I had insomnia and flashbacks and PTSD symptoms from my experiences as a college athlete, from performance anxiety and abusive coaching and all kinds of things that followed me after college sports, and I waited years and years later than I should have. I'm very thankful that I found a good therapist and that I'm in a good routine and a good place with my mental health, but I could have saved myself a lot of effort and a lot of discomfort and pain if I would have gotten started on that earlier and asked for help when I really needed it.
We spend a lot of time training the body, but not necessarily a lot of time training the mind and taking care of the mind, right? Good. Yeah. Want to add to that?
I think inherently, right, you don't have a strong body without a strong mind, but that starts to be looked at as mentally tough. And when you're not there, it's mentally weak. And so I think there's a lot of the discipline and the routine, the effort, the sacrifice that goes into it that helps build up, the mental side of things. But what happens when it's the opposite side? What happens when you feel a little mentally weak? And I think so that's why these are important. And as we continue to talk about it more and destigmatize, it's physically strong is great, but you have to have a holistic approach to your wellness and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and managing the stresses and the expectations. And so I think there's a piece of that you won't be physically strong until you are mentally strong. But what mentally strong means is that you're able to take things as they come, able to have a support system, able to speak about things when they come up and it's a pressing need. And so overall, it's a more holistic look at, hey, I want a strong body, but with that comes an understanding of self and an ability to talk about it when you need to and to kind of understand who you are and how you manage things best.
Yeah, a term that we use in sports a lot, and a lot of the time it's used at the start of a game or event, is set the tone. Like set the tone, come out of the gates flying, right? And both Connor and Katie talked about your mind and your body. Well, personally, I believe that it starts in your mind. Every day that you wake up, the first thing that's active is your mind. And your mind's telling you what you can and can't do, essentially. And I believe a lot of the confidence and the strength that have to do with your body and your mind come from within yourself of, knowing the right thing to do and knowing what's in front of you and actually accomplishing those things, whether it's for your own mental health or physical health, will give you strength in both of those categories to hopefully be successful and strong.
Yeah. Already heard the word holistic, and I'm going to throw in the word balance here, and it's going to lead me into my next question. And I know we have a lot of student athletes out here in the audience, and you all know, you experience it, and obviously our panelists know this. It's hard to balance all the things that go into being a good student athlete or being a good athlete, and all the different avenues in our life. So the next question is about that. It's about staying on top of everything, and everything means balancing all the different avenues and all the different aspects of your life. So talk a little bit about how you stay on top of everything and keep, or Coach, I think you mentioned manage. How do you manage and balance life?
I'll start with this one because I know it's something that, I've wrestled with a lot over the course of my, college career, pro career, then trying to balance, coaching and playing. A lot of it is recognizing, you're human, and there is an extent to which you can push until there's diminishing returns and maybe even harmful returns. And so I think it's a hard bar to get to, and especially when we all have a proclivity to doing more. We have a proclivity that drives us past most of our competition, and it gets to a certain point that you have to feel confident in your preparation, but you also have to recognize when it's time to let go just a little bit and let the results speak for themselves and let the outcome happen. And so specifically within our program at Cornell, to kind of manage that piece of it a little bit better, we talk about the inputs. Focus on the inputs, show up with the right attitude, effort, enthusiasm. Some days the ball's going to bounce your way, and some days it's not. But ultimately, there's a cap on what you can do, and then you just got to go out there and play. And so I think it's much the same when it comes to this topic and how you manage yourself and how you treat yourself, trying to do it all.
Yeah, just to add on to what Connor's saying, I think you use the word organization a lot, like being organized. And a lot of times we think about just having a calendar and what I have to do at a certain time in that day or what I have coming up. Well, being organized in your mind in itself is, being thorough and thought out. What's the most important thing in your life at this time? And, what follows that and what follows that, and being realistic with yourself, and then using that to put your time and effort into those things in the magnitude in which they deserve. So, for a lot of us athletes, we talk about family first, like I should be spending more time, if I'm saying that my family is the most important thing and say lacrosse is the second most important thing, I should be spending more time on my family than I am on my lacrosse stuff, because I'm organized in my train of thought. And once I'm able to do that, it's just about kind of separating those things as they come about. So when I'm focusing on my family, being 100% where my feet are, being present and focusing on that, and I think that will produce the best outcome. And then after that outcome's produced, now I'm moving on to lacrosse and, putting all my eggs in that basket at that time. And I think that allows for productivity. I think it allows you to manage your time and your thoughts in a better way.
You're really talking about keeping your priorities straight.
Correct.
Right? Yeah, good.
Mm-hmm. I think an important part of balance too, and this is something that can be really hard for athletes, because like we've mentioned earlier, it's really easy for athletes to go the extra mile and to just work to the point of diminishing returns. It's really important for athletes to make sure when you're competing at the highest level that you're also making time for fun in your life, because we say that we play a sport. That's a really common way to describe what we do, but we know that when you're competing, whether it's D3, D2, D1, NAIA, JUCO, it doesn't matter. When you're a competitive athlete, your sport sort of becomes a second job, and for some athletes, we will prioritize our sports over everything else, and then that's just an easy way to suck all the joy out of your sport. And I think it's important to remember why you started playing your sport. You started playing it because it was fun, hopefully, and hopefully, you continue to have fun as an athlete. But when you do get more competitive, it becomes a lot harder to have fun in your sport. So you need to find outlets outside of your sport as well. Investing in relationships is so incredibly important as an athlete, whether that's with your team or with your family or with your significant other, but finding your communities as well is an incredibly important part of finding balance and recognizing that you have significance and value, and that you exist at all outside of your sport, because it's so easy to just get wrapped up in who you are as an athlete and forget who you are as a person.
The fun factor.
Yes, fun is so important. I can't overstate that enough.
Right. All three of you have said something about being the competitor and that drive. And the next question is along the lines of, how do you push yourself and continue to push yourself when your headspace isn't where it needs to be? And then I'm going to add on, is that even healthy to do? So it's kind of two parts to that. How do you push yourself when you're not where you need to be in the right headspace, and when do you know when that's not healthy?
I'll start with that one, and just thinking about this from a game perspective is kind of the first place it took me. You're in the locker room, you're not feeling right, everything's not kind of vibing the way you want to. And how you manage it, where there is no option out. You're there. It's time to go. The prep is done, and so the results will be what they are. So for me personally, it's a lot of just taking the simple plays. Getting out on the field and doing little things that can hopefully build some confidence, build some rhythm, build some routine. Maybe not going out there with the plan to take over the game, but the plan just to chip away and start to find a little bit here, a little bit there, whether, in our sport in lacrosse, whether it's a ground ball, whether it's a good offensive shift where you're sharing the ball, making good decisions, getting back in the hole, playing defense, those little things that hopefully add up to a team victory, and you can support it maybe a different way than you would, but away from the field, right, away from someone else pushing you into it. I think there's those days you just got to walk away. And over the course of 7 years playing professionally, there was plenty of those days where we spend our time living in a different city than our team and traveling, and so it's a lot on you to do. And so there's those days where you're on, the turf running and you're just like, I don't have it today. And so for me, I found it was better just to walk away. When I was younger and a little more stubborn, I would keep trying to do it and keep trying to do it and get more frustrated, and the tension would build. And then you start to lose confidence, then you start to lose faith. So some days you just got to say, hey, you're on the treadmill, you're not hitting your marks, you just get off and, take care of yourself the rest of the day, and then get back at it tomorrow, versus, smashing your head against a brick wall over and over and expecting a different result.
And it sounds like you learned that, obviously, with maturity.
With maturity, it got significantly easier, but there was a point in time, specifically as a college student, that I don't think I could accept that result. I couldn't accept that it wasn't my best, and that stayed in my head and bothered me. And so with a little more maturity, a little more understanding of, hey, if today's not your day, maybe tomorrow will be better, went a long way in helping me take care of myself.
Yeah, in the heat of competition, there's really not many options, like you decide that today's not your day and you're not going to suit up and play in a game. Well, you kind of feel like you let your team down and you feel like a quitter. It's not an option that a lot of people exhaust. It's the only option is to walk through those doors and go perform, whether you're feeling it or not. And, I think from a team sport aspect, personally, like you talk about your own feelings. Well, I personally like to divert it to then the team. Like if I can't do it for myself today, if I'm not in the right headspace for myself, well, I'm going to do it for the guy next to me because of love and because of passion and because of being a part of something that's bigger than myself, knowing that on the next day, it could be the roles are reversed. Now, as far as not being in the heat of competition, I think a way to manage that is to recognize, when you do take a step back, why am I not in the right headspace? It's, there has to be a reason why. Am I exhausted? Am I burnt out? Okay, well, go get some more rest. Is there something bothering me in my relationship? Is there something that's bothering me, as being part of this team? Well, then go talk to someone and kind of put yourself in a place that you're more understanding, and hopefully that helps fizzle out those days where you might not be in the right headspace.
Got to be a reason for it, right? Yeah. Okay, good.
So I will say the absolute worst feeling in the world is in the middle of a 5K or a 10K when you feel like, oh man, I don't have my stuff today. I have been there many, many times before. And in the heat of the moment, there's like what y'all were talking about, there's not a ton that you can do. Some days it's just not your day. And you hope that those days don't fall on big performance days, but sometimes they do. And when that happens, I remember being on the track and just thinking, okay, one step at a time, like, run this next 100 meter, run this next lap, like just take it a chunk at a time. Something that I didn't do as a college athlete that I really should have done is, once the race is over, you want to have a very shallow memory, and you want to be very quick to forget those failures, because I would just hyperfixate on them and obsess over them, and I would forget the things that made me a good athlete. I would forget the times that I ran really well. If I had a bad practice, I would let that ruin the rest of my day, because we had morning practices all the time, and I would literally just sulk about it forever. And so it's really important to have that shallow memory, and it's important to reflect on what you're feeling on those days that you just don't have it. And that can be as simple as like Googling your symptoms and Googling what you're feeling. Like I remember in grad school when I was having sort of that decline in my mental health, I was Googling my symptoms all the time, and just having that knowledge at my disposal was super, super powerful. Just having a language and a way to express what you're feeling and what's going on internally can be really powerful, and finding trusted people to talk to about those things can be an absolute game changer. So being aware, acknowledging what you're feeling and what you're going through, not stuffing it down. Athletes are so good at stuffing down our emotions and our pain and just gutting through things, and that's not the route that you want to go with your mental health. You want to embrace what you're feeling, acknowledge what you're going through, learn as much as you can about yourself and about those feelings and those emotions, and find a way to work through them. Figure out a game plan, whether that's talking to somebody that you trust, bringing it up with your coach, finding a therapist in your area, or even just continuing to learn more about what you're feeling and going through. And that is a great place to start when you're really just not feeling yourself as an athlete.
We're good at picking out the negatives, focusing on the negatives, and we're good at trying to stuff all of that, right? Which, again, good transition to where I'm going next here. how do you deal with the what ifs? There's a lot of what ifs. We train, and we don't know what the outcome's going to be. And when we face an opponent that we should beat, we think we know the outcome, and then we're surprised. Or we just don't know. There's so many what ifs. What if I don't coach well? What if we don't win? What if I don't win? What if I fail? There's that word. What if I fail? What if I lose? And how's everybody going to see me? How do you deal with the what ifs?
That's hard. I failed massively as a college athlete. I had really high expectations for myself going into college sports. I wanted to qualify for nationals and become an All-American. And I was kind of knocking on that door my junior year. I had a really great season. My times were falling and I was doing really well. I missed nationals by 8 seconds in cross country. And that what if, it haunts me to this day. I'm not gonna lie or sugarcoat it. That is a what if that sticks with me. But for me, honestly, actually experiencing the failure and experiencing what I thought was the worst case scenario and the absolute end of the world, that was my only real way to get through it, because I experienced those failures and I fell short of what I wanted to do, but the sun rose the next day. I graduated, I got my degree. I found out that there's life after college sports, and I found new sports and new outlets and new things that I like to do, and I found that there was life worth living when my track and cross country career ended. So for me, those what ifs, if you dwell on them too much, it's just, it will ruin your life if you let it. So it's again, just having that short memory and remembering that you are a person outside of your sport, that there's life after college sports, and that you can find other things to do that can replace that love that you had for your sport, and that there's just so much more waiting for you on the other side.
Yeah, I think you can use what if in pretty much any scenario, you can form a whole new life off of what ifs, but personally, I used gratitude I just follow gratitude in the fact that, being an athlete, well, first and foremost, I'm grateful that I have a body that I can compete with, because I know, being a realist, that there's people out there that don't even have the option to even try to do what I do because of certain things that hold them back. So just being grateful to even be in a situation where I can compete, and then just kind of being realistic with myself. I remember when I was younger, getting on a roller coaster, being young, and my dad saying, you know what you're signing up for, you know what I mean? The butterflies, being scared, all that. Well, it's the same thing in sports. When I walk onto a lacrosse field, I'm aware of all of the consequences. I'm aware of all the negative things that can result in me being here, but I just follow gratitude in the fact that I am here. And you talk about being a collegiate athlete and being the 1%. That really puts it in perspective. If you're in the numbers, 1%, you're the 1% that's lucky enough to carry on, where, I would say close to 80% to 90% of high school kids are participating in sports. And some of them love them and don't get the opportunity to be where you are. And some of them, an injury holds them back, or, their parents hold them back, or, all these situations. So just being grateful that you have the opportunity to take it one day at a time and put yourself in a situation to fail. Failure is not the worst thing that happened, but being afraid to put yourself in situations to fail is, to me, more of a failure than actually not getting the result that you desired.
Yeah, just to touch on what they both hit on, the uncertainty can mar a lot of things, and usually the what if is the failure. The interesting part about failure is it usually begets success. You realize that the worst thing that you had on your mind, that you lose the game, that you don't perform as well as you want to, that you feel like you failed at that particular moment, it's not fatal and it's not final, and at some point you can look back, and even if it's the end of your career or the end of the season or whatever it might be, you can take a lot of positives out of it. And so we tend to conjure these things up in our head, but the actual outcome that we have in mind that seems so scary and daunting, at the end of the day, usually, you get a quick reminder that it wasn't nearly as bad as you thought it might be, and then hopefully you get another chance from there, that you can kind of build some confidence from that the downside isn't as bad as you once thought.
Good. A lot of what ifs, and of course we all know that there's always injury in sport, and you're in it long enough, you're going to be injured to some degree. So knowing that injury is there and having experienced it in the past for most of us, and even if you haven't, knowing that it's a great possibility, how do you prepare yourself to compete? We're all driven to drive, to compete at that high level, knowing that you're dealing with an injury, knowing that you're not 100%.
You go back to the first question, strong body, strong mind. And like, I think it's a mindset, you know, a lot of the times, like, you just talk about your mindset going into it and facing the reality of the what if. Well, the power of the mind telling yourself that you can keep going, you know, until you reach a physical exhaustion or a point where you physically can't stand or physically can't compete, you know, like if you engrave that into your head going into a competition, like, you would be amazed what you can accomplish while feeling pain and while not functioning at 100%. And I just use my brain to tell myself that, you know, you're still standing, you're still breathing, and, you know, you're still in this. So just following my brain.
Yeah, you know, I'll take it back to another question as well. When you don't feel mentally up for it, you know, is a similar way that I'd approach it. And again, having this at several points in my career, you know, be additive. If you're going to be, you know, in the lineup and it's okay enough to play, then at that point, how do you add the value and what are the little things that you can do? And even if you're not, you know, doing certain things to the best of your ability, how can you kind of pick up the slack? And so certainly every time that I've been in that situation, it's been about making sure that, you know, I'm not just dressed to be dressed, but dressed to add value to the team.
Yeah, injuries are really hard for athletes because they're a huge threat to our identity. You know, we wrap up so much of who we are in our performance in our sport, and injury really threatens a lot of that. And when I was injured as a college athlete, because that was really what started the decline of my career. I had an IT band injury, and then I blew up my knee, one right after the other, and it was the most frustrating experience of my life. And one thing that I did that was really detrimental to myself and my healing process and my mental health was I isolated myself from my teammates, because I thought if I'm not adding value to my team on the track, then, you know, I'm not an asset. I'm not useful to this team. I shouldn't even bother, you know, going out with my teammates or doing anything with them. And so I cut my own self off from my community, and I was really, I was kicking myself while I was down. And so I think a really important part of managing injuries as an athlete is making sure that you're still being as much of a part of your team as possible. And it will be challenging when you can, you know, when you're watching your teammates doing the things that you wish that you could do, or when you hear them talking about practice and meets and stuff like that. But you have to stay engaged in that community, because if you end up isolating yourself for whatever reason, it can really, you know, come back and bite you, and it's just not a great experience to be injured and alone. So don't do that to yourself. If you get injured, remain a part of your team, however is possible.
Yeah, it's interesting when we're struggling with something, we wind up cutting off the people who can probably help us the most, right? Yeah. Let's go to the other side of that. If you could share a time, an event, something, an obstacle that you overcame that you're really proud of in your career up to this point.
Yeah, so a big issue particularly for female athletes is eating disorders. That's a huge, huge problem, especially in aesthetic-based sports, or, you know, sports like track and cross country, where there's, you know, a certain appearance that is really favored in those kinds of sports. And I would say my biggest accomplishment, one, if not, you know, in my athletic career, in my life, was overcoming years and years of disordered eating habits and full-blown eating disorders. So I think about, you know, this trip that I'm on right now. It's involved a lot of travel, a lot of late nights, a lot of uncertainty about what I'm going to be eating and what food is going to be available. Eating disorder Katie could not have taken this trip at all, because there was just too much uncertainty, there was too much fear, and there were too many unknowns for me to manage. There's no way that I could have done this trip and maintain, you know, my sanity and my mental health. And having an eating disorder, it will absolutely suck the life out of you, literally, you know, because food is energy and food is fuel and food is your friend, especially as an athlete. And so I think I'm most proud of the fact that I have put in a lot of work to overcome that really terrible eating disorder that I had, and I'm constantly working on making sure that my relationship with food is healthy and balanced and is adding to my life instead of taking away from it.
For me personally, just I'm, you know, like for being like a top 1% of being an athlete, like I go up against guys that are more physically fit than me, more physical stature. You know, it's easy to judge a book by its cover, and it's always been something, you know, my nickname in high school was meat, and like I've always been on the thicker side of things. But the one thing that's really guided me through a lot of my success in sports and in life is my competitive nature. And one thing that I'm proud of is my ability now to leave the competitor at the door when I walk out of a locker room. As I get older, I realize that, you know, it is a game, and it's a game that provides me, you know, my everything. You know, it's how I get paid. It's who I am. It provides me happiness. But when I walk out of those doors, not bringing lingering things that happen during a game into other parts of my life that will, you know, eventually have longer effects on my relationships with people that I care about, with decisions that I make, you know, that can further benefit me. And I just think learning to balance being a competitor on the field and then being myself, and, you know, not using lingering results to affect what's next for me.
I hear a change of perspective in both of those.
Correct.
My, you know, kind of defining moment and a big piece of who I am today and why I coach lacrosse was my freshman year at Cornell. Came in and was a highly touted recruit and was a big fish in a small pond in high school, and got there, and the waters got a whole lot deeper pretty quickly. And both in school and in lacrosse, I felt myself floundering a little bit, and again, kind of letting everything bleed into one another. That struggling in school, I was struggling on the field, I was, you know, was isolating myself a little bit because of that. And so, you know, had months and months of immense struggle and calling home and thinking that probably wasn't the place for me, and that, you know, I wasn't cut out for the challenges that were coming my way. And, you know, through a lot of introspection and a lot of, you know, a great support system around me, and, you know, really, you know, good people pushing me in the right direction. And again, perspective change. I was able to kind of come around and went from being a guy that wasn't on the bus and wasn't on the field to, you know, having a great career and really enjoying my time. But certainly a defining moment for me, looking back and recognizing that I let the what ifs kind of overcome the enjoyment of playing and the gratitude for where I was at. And the success was the only thing that mattered to me. And whether it was being on the field, whether it was getting the A, whether it was, you know, contributing in some way that other people outside of maybe my circle would recognize, when that kind of got away, and then I took some, realistically, at that same time, my sister was a gymnast and got injured pretty severely, and it helped me manage that perspective, and something that was that big in her life and something that she took on so well, realizing sport kind of wasn't it, helped me kind of come around to that. So forever I look back on who I am today, what I do today, in that moment of uncertainty and overcoming it, and a perspective change. But that's something that I'm proud about and continues to help me as I manage difficult situations today.
Good. Obviously, so much what we're talking about comes under the umbrella term of mental health and obviously strong bodies and minds. And this phrase, mental health, as we said at the beginning, it's arguably one of the most important terms that we're dealing with right now in the culture of athletics. Tell us a little bit about how you have and how you're going about destigmatizing this phrase, mental health.
Just talking about it is a hugely important part of breaking the stigma around anything that is stigmatized. And so, you know, having these conversations is a hugely important part. And it can be as simple as like I drop in everyday conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, my therapist said X, Y, Z, or like, oh, you know, I got to go to Walgreens to pick up my anxiety meds. Like, it's very easy to very, you know, colloquially drop mental health jargon into your everyday conversations, and just in making it a part of you don't have to make it your personality necessarily or talk about it all the time, but just in bringing it up and making it a part of your everyday conversation, not only does that destigmatize it, but it also communicates to people that that I am a safe person to come to if you need help with your mental health. And just being that person is a hugely important part also of destigmatizing it.
Yeah, to add on to making yourself vulnerable, I think, as a male, you talk about like your competitive shield, like, you're in a room with guys that are competitors and you want to be the toughest and the strongest, and you think, talking about this stuff or shedding a tear is a sign of weakness, and, people prey on weakness, like you kind of, your mindset with that, but being able to let down your competitive shield with people that you are close to, and kind of take off that tough guy look and, really dig into your emotion. By dropping that shield, you're allowed to really dig into your emotion and, have deeper conversations than, oh, just tough it out. Oh, you'll be good, my man. Like, you're good, like it goes a lot deeper than that. And one thing that I've been practicing a lot more is just telling people that I care about, that I love them. It wasn't something I even said to my best friend until about 2 years ago. In my head, me telling someone that I loved them was a sign of weakness, a sign of vulnerability, and I've taken upon myself to let people that I think about a lot and that I care about a lot, and I know deep down that I do, to let them know that by expressing that I love them. So that's one thing that I've done.
Just to echo Blaze's point, I think there's the tough guy mentality in sports and competition, that the tough guy is the more successful within the arena competition. But the reality is, teams specifically that bond together, that are vulnerable together, that are open with one another, that bond, is significantly stronger than that of guys putting on the macho appearance. And so for us, the more that we can address the needs of our team, again, I felt that as a player, I feel that as a coach now, the more that we can address the needs of our team, the more we're going to be able to accomplish, because guys are going to feel more comfortable, more willing, and again, be hopefully a little lighter in terms of the load on their shoulders, and be able to contribute more fully to the team.
Yeah, good. All right, I'm going to get a little bit more personal here, okay? You're on tour for a book, right? So there's some stresses going with that. Stresses being a pro athlete, new stresses as a coach for the last few years, right? How do you de-stress? What do you do to get rid of the stress?
I still work out. That is my number one de-stressing method. I think, once an athlete, always an athlete really rings true for me. And it's so nice now that I have a good relationship with exercise, where it's not a punishment or it's not a chore. It's like, I want to go to the gym today. I want to lift. I want to be strong. I want to use the food that I'm eating to build muscle, instead of like trying to run it all off. And so exercise is a hugely important de-stressor for me. It's something I have to kind of explain to people too, because I work out really frequently, to the point where, I'll be talking to people about like, oh, I have so much to do, and I don't have time. And they'll be like, well, don't go to the gym. Like, you'll save, an hour or two a day. And I'm like, no. Like, that is mandatory. That is my second form of therapy. Like, I have to go to the gym. But it doesn't feel like an obligation because I'm being forced to do it. It feels like an obligation because of the clarity that I get after a workout, and just the ability after college sports to reclaim exercise as something that's fun and something that's healthy and something that adds on to my life instead of taking away from it. It just adds on to the many ways that exercise is now healthy and a de-stressor for me.
Yeah, for me, it's like with team sports, you talk about like building a culture, like what's your culture, what's your foundation? Well, as I'm getting older, like I want to build a life, and I'm lucky enough that I have a beautiful girlfriend and a dog and a home now, and I find a lot of satisfaction in, building those pillars and the foundation at home, whether it's focusing, extra on my relationship, or doing something around my house that I know I travel about 40 weeks out of the year, that when I'm away, I know everything's good at home, and when I get home, I feel safe, I feel comfortable, and by doing that, I know I'm continuing to add value to my life and what's going to be my life down the road, because it starts with a home and, support, and I just kind of focus that energy and kind of my competitive nature on that, and it allows me to have a lot of comfort when I'm away and when I'm competing, and when results aren't going my way, knowing that I have that at home and that I'll always be able to go back to that. A lot like when you're younger and you have your parents and, you know, what they provide for you, or a friend or a family, whoever it may be, that you go back to. Well, that's what I'm building for myself, that I'm in control of.
For me, it's balance. And again, you know, to Blaze's point, whether it's family and going home to something, whether it's working out, to Katie's point, whether it's, you know, hobbies, getting out and playing golf and relaxing, whether it's sleeping, if I need, you know, that part of it, being able to turn it off for a little bit and understand that there's a greater purpose, that, it, you know, an extra hour, 2 hours of work, another extra, you know, whatever it might be, isn't going to help me as much as maybe taking a little time away and relaxing, or you know, pushing my body, or whatever it might be. So for me, it's been the balance and the ability to recognize that some days where I don't want to do it even, or feel that it's not necessary, or I don't have the time, that's when it's probably most important.
Yeah, good. And I know all three of you have already spoke to what I'm about to ask here, but talk a little bit more about the support systems in your life and what they do for you, the people.
Yeah, I have a wonderful community back home in Austin. My boyfriend is an amazing support for me. It's funny, I didn't date at all in college because I was convinced like I have to be an athlete and I have to be like the best athlete possible. And so I had this tunnel vision around dating because I was like, I don't have time. Like I can't do this and be an athlete at the same time because I have to solely focus on my sport. But you know, investing in that relationship, even with everything else that I have going on, because I'm a very busy person, but having, you know, my boyfriend to come home to, and he's also a significant de-stressor for me because he brings so much, you know, happiness and fun and humor into my life that I would not have, you know, if he wasn't there. So he's a huge part of that. I have friends who you know, serve a similar function in my life. They push me to be the best version of myself, but they're also there to hang out on a Friday night and watch Netflix with. They celebrate my successes, but I know that if I fail, they're still going to be there and they're still going to love me just as much. And so it's definitely my boyfriend and my friends, and also just having, you know, my family to call when I'm feeling really rough. There's no one else that I'd rather talk to than my mom. She is always like the person to go to with my problems. And so it really takes a village to, you know, support your mental health sometimes. And I think it's difficult to take that first step sometimes when you're struggling and reach out to people, and not even necessarily just asking for help, but being like, hey, you know, I've had a stressful week. Can we like grab pizza and just hang out? Like sometimes that can be really hard for me. Like my first instinct when I'm feeling overwhelmed is to isolate and to just like control what I can control and to not reach out to other people. And so taking those steps to, you know, reach out to people and to form those connections is hugely important.
Yeah, I talked about luckily having a family that always supported me, a girlfriend, all that. But you know, specific to lacrosse, at least through my experiences, is that it's such a team-oriented sport. Like you show up to college by yourself, and within one day you have 47 brothers. And you know, I always use like this roller coaster thing. Like when you're a little kid and you're scared to go on a roller coaster, and you see a kid in front of you who's a little bit younger and a little bit smaller go on the roller coaster. Well, then that gives you the confidence to kind of, you know, oh, he did it, I do it. Well, in lacrosse, being able to look around the locker room and knowing that all the guys are kind of feeling the same hardships you're feeling, of either a loss or a hard day at practice or being tired because you were up studying, and just the configurative, you know, sense that they're in it for the same reason that you are, like brings me a lot of comfort, you know, and I feel support without even having to talk, that they're supporting me because they're giving up what's best for them for what's best for me and everyone else around them. And I find support in that sense. Yep.
Katie and Blaze said it well. Family, friends, significant others, just people that you can turn to. And interestingly enough, I think every conversation's a little different, but you know, the gist of it is always the same, and the care and the support's the same. But you know, if you call one of your boys or your girlfriend or your mom, you're gonna get 3 very different conversations. And so having that kind of array of people to turn to and lean on is important.
Yeah, good. I don't have a good transition to where I'm going next, so I'm just going right to the next thing here. We've all talked about this. You hear it all the time. You have other speakers that come in talking about nutrition and sleep, how important it is. We all know how important it is. It's one of those things, we hear it all the time, and it doesn't mean we eat right, and it doesn't mean we sleep, the needed amount of sleep or whatever it is. How do you balance eating right? You've talked about it from a very personal perspective already and what you've gone through. Talk about nutrition and sleep, the importance on mental health.
Yeah, I mean, physical health and mental, and we've talked about how they're very, very closely related. If you're not taking care of your basic needs, then how are you going to take care of those higher kind of mental health needs? And that said, as athletes, it is really easy to swing in that opposite direction and be too strict with your diet, or be so stringent about a bedtime routine that you don't have any fun with your friends. Or maybe that was me in college for sure. My teammates would joke because I liked to go to bed at like 8 o'clock. I was really obsessed with getting enough sleep, and so they knew I would never go out with them. So it was kind of like a running joke on my team, but it was pretty accurate too. And so for me, in retirement now, I think it's important to focus on averages when it comes to getting sleep and eating well. So like, for example, if I know I'm really pushing a deadline one night and I might only get like 4 hours of sleep, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go to bed super early the next night and make sure that I'm making up for that and that I'm taking care of myself physically. And it's the same thing with, diet and exercise. It's like if I have a day where I maybe don't eat as well as I would like to, or I don't manage to get to the gym, it's like, okay, we can make up for that later if that is supporting, a balanced lifestyle. Because it is really easy to say like, okay, I ate nothing but, high calorie foods today, so I'm just not gonna eat the next. That's not what I'm saying that you should do. You want to have some degree of flexibility and understand that perfection isn't possible in either of those areas when it comes to sleep and nutrition, but finding what works best for you and that, big word of balance is really important in that area.
Yeah, Blaze, I think you're the first one that brought it up earlier, but being structured and organized and making it a priority. What I'm hearing in that is nutrition and sleep has to be a priority, but you got to plan for it, right? And if you miss out on one day, you got to plan for it the next. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it's important. We're all different in our own ways, and we're all unique, and we're not robots. So, like, I'm gonna be straightforward and say that, my my success hasn't been built around nutrition and sleep personally. I was lucky enough that, I don't know if it's just from falling in love at an early age or just being blessed, but I've just been, kind of more talented than everyone. And the back end of that is I can admit and I can look in the mirror and I can be confident knowing that I'm not the most athletic guy on the field. I'm not following the most strict diet. There's guys who are physically way more fit, stronger, faster, but knowing myself, knowing my mind, knowing my body, knowing that, I have enough talent, knowing that I am competitive enough. And I'm not saying that I'm eating pizza every night. I do work out, I do sleep, but it's never been like a huge priority of mine personally. And I don't know if that's just me listening to my mind or just finding success at an early age, being a little thicker and just gaining enough confidence to know that it didn't matter what level I did it at, that I'm capable of being successful the way I am, and just biting down on my mouth guard and doing it.
If I'm being perfectly honest, my nutritional decisions have never been in line with what I'd probably hoped they would be. I felt that I could get away with a lot on that front and probably could have helped myself more, but that was what it was. Sleep, however, though, has always been a big priority for me. I feel the difference when I sleep well and when I don't sleep well, and whether that's just kind of the thoughts upstairs and how you manage your day and how you're feeling about it, whether it's your willpower and your desire, whether it's your ability to recover and feel better the next day. Even now in my current job, just the ability to communicate and not be foggy because you're sleep deprived throughout the course of the week has been a really important topic for me. So for me, it's always been if I sleep well, I'm a different person, and if I sleep poorly, that shows. And so I prioritize that during the course of the week and make sure I'm getting to bed at a reasonable hour. And if I need to sleep in on the weekends, I do it. And I don't feel bad about that because I know it makes the best version of me.
Yeah, good. Obviously, so much of what you have done for all these years, and the word identity has come up a couple of times. We form this identity, this sport identity, now maybe a coaching identity. How do you separate you, the person, from you, the athlete, or you, the coach? The identity of and the label of a coach athlete, right? and who you are, your own self-worth? How do you separate that?
I think a lot of it has to do with investing in your life outside of your sport, and that's definitely easier said than done, especially at the college level, but really, investing in hobbies outside of your sport, whether it's, like I'm a writer, I love to write, and I do it for my job as a doctoral student, but if I get too wrapped up in my research, it's easy for me to fall back into that tunnel vision I had as an athlete. And so I found ways to sort of transform my love of writing into different outlets that don't really that don't carry the same weight as like my academic writing does. So like I love to freelance and I love to do creative writing, and so having those outlets outside of what I do for my degree, while still maintaining my love for what I do is important as well. And really, making time again for relationships is something that's really important as well, because there are some times when I get wrapped up in what I perceive to be my failures as a professional, as a writer, as a PhD student. Like there are all kinds of academics who are outperforming me right now. And so like I really get wrapped up in my failures. There are also times where like I'll enter my book into a competition and it doesn't win, and that would crush me if I didn't go to my friends to vent about it and have them like hype me up in return. So it's really about, for me, finding outlets outside of what you do for a living, whether that's a sport or whether that's something else. And also finding those relationships that add value to your life and supplement the good in your life and don't take away from it, that you can go to when you need support or when you need a word of encouragement.
Yeah, I can confidently say that I can't remember the results of any of my games, 3 years ago. I can remember which year I won a championship, but I can't remember the score, who we played against on those days. But like what I do remember is the people that I was with, and having my friend, knowing that my friend drove 5 hours to come support me and watch me play, and the people that were there, or maybe even just, playing in a location where there's mountains surrounding me. I almost remember everything except the result. And like you focus so much on the result your whole life, and then time passes and the result is just a diminishing memory. Like you just remember events. Like you remember certain things, like, oh, it was freezing cold that day, but I couldn't tell you what the score was. I couldn't tell you how I performed, and I think that just kind of took time for me. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Interesting how much we focus on those outcomes and those results, and how many years later we don't remember any of the outcomes or results, but we remember the relationships, the value of teammates, the places we were at, the feelings that we got, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it really crystallized for me an identity away from lacrosse until after I retired. Realistically, most of our year was spent, all spring was playing or was coaching, all summer was playing, and then kind of getting ready for the next, seasons. And so I'm not sure until I had a little bit more time to step away and take a few weekends to myself and again, add a little balance to my life, that I really started to crystallize an identity outside of the game itself. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I think it would have paid dividends, and especially down the tail end of my career, had I done it earlier and had I had a little bit more balance and an ability to step away. But, in hindsight, I'm thankful and for all of my experiences, grateful for all of the ups and downs of it. But certainly, it's in hindsight, it's easier to meld that way than when it was in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we're gonna have a little fun with this one. Last couple of questions here. We got a lot of obviously student athletes out here and college student athletes. We got some younger high school athletes here. If you could do this, what you've learned now, and you've shared a lot of your experiences in terms of maturity and things that you've learned. But if you could go back and tell your college athlete self, something that you did not know back then that you wish you would have known, what would that be?
I would tell younger Katie to advocate for herself a little bit more. You know, both in terms of my physical health and also in terms of my mental health. This might not have so much to do with mental health, this first one, but when I was in college, the women's cross-country team was not allowed to lift weights because we were told that we would get bulky and that it would negatively impact our performances. And looking back, it's like that's the best thing I could have done for injury prevention, and that would have probably saved me a lot of pain on the mental side as well. And not only that, but advocating for myself a little bit more when, you know, my coaches were ignoring what was going on with me mentally and telling them like, no, like I can't compete today. I can't practice today. I'm not with it mentally. I need a break, you know, and just having the boldness to know when I needed to step away from things and having the boldness to know when I needed to stick up for myself a little bit more. So I would really, you know, implore younger Katie to be more assertive and to make sure that, you know, my needs were voiced and that my needs were being met as an athlete and that I was being respected in those situations as well, both physically and mentally.
I think younger Connor could have heard that the results won't be indicative of your experience. You know, the outcomes, again, to what we just talked about in the last question and what Blaze referenced, you're not going to remember the games or the outcomes or, you know, maybe how things ended as much as you're going to remember the journey. And so enjoy it, give all of yourself, don't leave any regrets in what you could have done. And then at the end of the day, you know, the ball bounces the way it goes, and you're going to live with that one way or another. But I think we build up that result as, you know, the end all and the be all, when in reality it's just a point in time versus the rest that are all equally as important.
Yeah, I think as you get older, you naturally take on new experiences and you hear more sides of the story. And my advice to myself in college would kind of be to explore outside my team. You know, I spent a lot of time just hanging out with guys on my team. I was comfortable with them. There was enough guys on the team where I didn't feel like I needed to go, you know, out and get outside my comfort zone and meet someone that wasn't a lacrosse player, or, you know, learn different experiences and hear different voices and hear where other people were coming from. I was more comfortable with knowing that every guy that I was with had one thing in common, and that we loved lacrosse, and kind of just took that and ran with it rather than getting to know someone that maybe didn't grow up the same way that I grew up or had the same passions and what their life kind of looked like. Because one of the biggest things I've learned as I've gotten older is you learn a lot from other people and their experiences, and you help use those experiences to manage your own and, you know, to build as a person.
Yeah. All your past and obviously, you know, current experiences, right to the point. What's the best part of competition, the opportunity to perform, compete? What's the best part of that?
It's just fun to put yourself out there. It's something, you know, I crave that now, even as a retired college athlete. I'll enter like local weightlifting competitions knowing that I'm not going to do great, but I love to get on the platform. I love to put myself out there, and I love to challenge myself. And so it's such a cool opportunity when you are at your physical peak and when you can perform to the highest level in college or high school, just to be able to put yourself out there in a really exciting and engaging way and to test your limits. There's nothing that will test you like competition. And that's something, you know, I seek it out in weightlifting competitions. I seek it out in you know, public events like this where I'm on stage. I seek it out with my book and entering competitions or entering my research into conferences and just really advocating for what I do and why it matters. Like that in and of itself for me now, it really gives me a lot of life to put myself out there and to constantly challenge myself. And that's that is such a huge perk of being a college athlete, is that it's really built into your job description. It's such a cool opportunity, and it's something, you know, I wish I could have one more track meet at my physical peak. Like, I know I would be miserable if I tried to run like a 5K now, but you know, when I was 18, 19, 20, it's like, I would have been like, yeah, let's go. Let's run under the lights. Let's see what I can do. And I definitely, you know, crave that now, and I seek that out however I can.
Yeah, mine's kind of evolved over the years. Like, I got into it because it was fun, and then it turned into like a sensation that I couldn't get anywhere else in my life. Specifically to lacrosse, it's a contact sport, so kind of like that warrior mentality, like, you know, putting your body on the line and, you know, like kind of getting the, you know, do stuff that you can't do in everyday life. Like I can't run around, you know, my streets and hit people with my stick and, you know, body check them and, you know, like feel pain and deliver pain and, you know, and then it kind of turns into like, it's the most realist form of result, you know, like in my everyday life, there's so many different things in my environment that can affect my outcome in like certain scenarios. But I feel like in sport and in the game of lacrosse, like the closest thing to that is like a referee, you know, and we're taught never to blame the referee, but it's really like, it's your team versus our team. Who's ever better on this day? Like we have the same conditions. It's either snowing or it's nice out. The goals are the same size. You know, the playing field's even, and it's who's ever better on that day is going to become victorious. And I realized like through everyday life that that's not always the case, and that life can sometimes be unfair, and you know, sometimes you can get lucky. And I just appreciate the realness of competition in sport.
The thrill and the exhilaration, you know, much to what they both said. It brings a smile to my face, honestly, just thinking, you know, Blaze and I were fortunate enough to play on the USA team together. And I've got this vivid memory of Blaze walking around the locker room before we played, and I can't remember, I think it was at the tournament. And he's just saying, hey, what's better than this? What's better than this, right? Big goal, small ball, you know, let's go compete. And it was just, you know, it's those moments that you look back on, that the ramp up, the ability to compete, the ability to play the last whistle, and then, you know, you see where it ends up. But that lead up, the thrill of it all is definitely what draws me to it.
Yeah, good. All right, I got one last question. Get your questions ready. In a couple minutes, you'll have an opportunity to ask a few questions of our panelists. One last question for all of you. If there's one takeaway that you wish everybody in this group here tonight would walk away with, what is that takeaway that you want to give them?
I'll leave you with this. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. Give all of yourself to it. You know, don't ever regret not doing. You know, put yourself out there. Enjoy it. Again, don't let the results dictate your experience. And at the end of the day, I think you'll appreciate what you got out of it. Again, win, loss, or draw.
Yeah, I think beyond the results, like every outside factor, your coach, what's going on outside of sport, what's going on in your life, like the most important thing is to be true to yourself and be able to look in the mirror, and that's where all of your confidence should come from. Your confidence shouldn't come from your buddy telling you that you're doing great, or your coach telling you doing great, or getting an A. You should be able to look in the mirror, and even if it's an F or even if it's an A, being able to look in the mirror and know you put yourself in the best situation, you know, put yourself to the best of your ability, and you went out and took it on, whether you fail or succeed. Those are the steps to success and personal happiness, and the rest will take care of itself.
I might sound like I'm contradicting you two just a little bit, but I would say just relax a little bit. And that doesn't mean slack off. Like, don't text your coach to say, hey, I'm not coming to practice tomorrow because I went to this panel and this lady told me to not do anything. I'm not telling you to slack off. There's a huge difference between relaxing and not being so uptight about your sport and being a slacker. It can be a fine line sometimes, so you don't want to swing too far in the opposite direction. But, you know, like if I could go back and tell my college athlete self, you know, another really important thing, it would be that you don't have to be perfect as an athlete. The stars don't have to align perfectly for you to be successful and for you to enjoy your sport. And this is a very small sliver of your life. You know, most of us are not going to be going pro in our sports. If you do, that's an incredible privilege, and take advantage of that. But understand that, you know, this is a small portion of your life, and you have a whole life ahead of you after college sports. You don't want to make decisions as a college athlete that will permanently injure you, that will permanently damage relationships or your mental health to the point that it follows you throughout your life. So be smart. Go hard, have fun, and just relax a bit.
Be smart, have fun, enjoy the process, relax a little bit. Okay, good. All right, here's what we're going to do next. We have some mics. I'm not sure where they're at. I don't know if the lights will come up here a little bit. But we have an opportunity for all of you to ask a few questions. We've got about 15 minutes or so here. Please, if there's something that you'd like to ask any one of the panelists or all of them, grab a mic here. I don't know where the mics are, but we're walking around with them here in a minute. Okay, we got mics. So here we go. Anybody?
thank you to the panelists. This is an excellent discussion, and I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone speaking today, and also the quick video that we saw, which I assume was produced by Ithaca College folks. I did not have the privilege nor ability to be a student athlete, but I am an avid spectator, in fact, of both Ithaca College and Cornell sports. I'm a local community member, and I'm also an Ithaca College grad, class of '91. Two things, and I'll be brief, that I'd love to bring up that I did not hear today. The first is the influence of social media on mental health. I am thankful, actually, that I am not an athlete, pro or amateur, but I'd love to hear from the panelists, especially the coach, but all three of you, really, recommendations, advice, or experiences related to social media and how it's affected your mental health, assuming, negatively. Again, as a spectator, I, read social media and can't even imagine the pressure that student athletes may feel. The other, and again, really would love to hear from training regimens, is yoga and meditation, both of which I'm bringing up because they have to do with the breath, which is one of the #1 ways that we can address anxiety, whether we're a student athlete or not. So I'd love to hear how that may come into play when it comes to training regimens. I think stereotypically we don't hear about yoga and meditation. Maybe they're poo-pooed a little bit, or have some stigma related to them, or maybe they're not. They're for certain sports and others that they're not. So I'd love to hear from all the folks on those two items. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the questions. A lot there. Let's jump on the social media one for a second. Really interested here.
I'll start with social media. It's a challenge, to be quite frank. I think as it's become more omnipresent, I think the people that are patting you on the back have become much more accessible, right? And every time someone has an opinion, it comes right to you, and your phone pings, and you pick it up, and you read it, and you see it. But just the same, when you're not playing as well, and things aren't going as well, you're not winning games, you get a lot more of that criticism, and it shows up right to your phone, where it feels like your world grows immensely, and you can talk about not reading it and not being about it, and staying away from it as much as you want. When your phone's dinging because someone's tagging you and telling you how good or bad you are, it makes it that much harder to avoid it. And so I know down the stretch of my pro career, I dealt with it. I know as a coach, I still deal with it. Talking to our players, we deal with it. It's hard to avoid, that is the tagline, don't listen to it. It's rat poison is the Nick Saban thing. But at the end of the day, it's so, present, and it's so available. It's tough not to. And so I think we're dealing with a whole nother set of problems, and the mental health struggles, I think, are in part due to the social media and how present it is. So I think we are still managing that as we go and figuring out best practices. But I can say with absolute certainty that it's not good for staffs, players, student athletes alike.
Makes that line of identity and self-worth a hard line to walk. So it's hard enough on its own. Now it's harder, right? Okay. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, so social media is kind of complicated, I think, for younger generations because it's becoming more and more of a necessity, especially like for professional networking. It is surprising how much networking you can get done on social media. That's actually how I ended up on this panel, because I was sharing my work on LinkedIn, and the college reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested, and I was like, of course I would. And so it is really kind of becoming a necessity, even just from like a professional business perspective, but there is, a darker side to it. And I would say something that's been really important for me to do, especially like on Instagram and more visual platforms, is to follow athletes with your body type. And we're so lucky because like I was a child of the 90s, so I grew up in the very, stick-thin supermodel kind of era, and we have access to a lot of body diversity now on social media, which is really, really great for women, to see different kinds of bodies and how, they look when they're working out, and how they look in different clothes, and how, angles and lighting and posing can completely change the way that you look online. And editing, that's a whole other, ballpark to talk about, but it's really important to find, people who represent you and especially who represent your body type on social media.
just quickly, I just think, you know, like even with your family or your closest people, there's tough love and then there's love. At the end of the day, whether it's good or bad, the messages you receive, it means that you're making an impact. It means those people are thinking about you. They have an opinion about you. And to me, that's kind of like progress, that I'm making a difference. I'll leave it at that, yeah.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, and I just want to quickly, I'll just take 15 seconds here and address the second part of that, or the second question, I guess. Yoga, meditation, we talked about how our panelists de-stress and how all of us, it's a challenge for all of us to think, how do we get rid of the stresses in our lives? It's not can we get rid of them? It's and I know a lot of you have heard me say this before, it's about managing them, right? Whether you are reactive or you're proactive, right? Yoga, meditation, you know, simple breathing techniques, there's a lot of things that we can do, and those should be a part of what we investigate to help us de-stress and help us with our own mental health. Okay, good. Another question.
Hi, I'm a junior on the women's basketball team here. I know you guys touched upon this briefly, but can you talk about the transition into like life after sports and kind of like how that transition looked for you personally, how maybe like you've seen other people deal with that, just because it's coming up quick and fast for us, so.
Life after sport.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I might as well get it over with because mine was not a pretty transition, so mine's not the best note to end on for sure. I lost a huge sense of myself after college sports ended. I didn't really have, you know, any vocabulary for it at the time, but I recognized like the summer that I graduated as a very, you know, depressive period in my life where I, again, was isolating myself. I was just like, I was not myself. And, you know, if I could go back, the number one thing that I would have done to prevent that, though, so hopefully this is a better way to end my comment, because I don't want to sugarcoat it for y'all, I want to be honest. But the thing that I could have done to help me out in that situation is to invest in my mental health before it became a problem. So there are all kinds of resources that are usually available at the college level. If you're feeling any kind of anxiety about the end of your career, that's a great time to seek out a therapist. There are all kinds of apps too with licensed therapists. Talk to your teammates about it, form a community, start a group chat where you can reach out to each other over the summer. But you want to start to manage that anxiety sooner rather than later so that it doesn't consume you when your career inevitably ends.
For me, I'd say I haven't completely detached yet. You know, my role has certainly changed, but I think it still consumes a similar part of my life. But with the little free time that I did free up between not playing, I think a lot of what I started to do is fill the time with things that you wanted to do, right? You know, you guys practice all the time. You're always preparing. You're avoiding vacations and meals and trips with friends and hobbies that you might otherwise do if you had more time in the day. And so that was what I started to fill my free time with was, you know, golf and vacations and, you know, more time with family and friends. And it certainly made that a very simple process. Again, I haven't totally kind of turned that leaf necessarily, but, you know, in the in-between, having other things that I had missed out on and sacrificed for a long time certainly helped me deal with it.
Yeah, I currently still play, so I'm still engraved in sports, but being a professional lacrosse player, we don't make millions of dollars playing, so I'm also an entrepreneur. I have youth lacrosse programs, and I run lacrosse camps all over the country. And one tool that I would use, and it has to do with confidence, is knowing that sports teach you so much without you even knowing until, you know, it's over, or until you get older and you realize, because all you've been doing is competing your whole life. Like, the wins and the losses aren't what you're going to carry on. It's the tools, you know, being a leader, being a part of something, the hard work, the extra hours you put in. Those are things that are going to translate into your life. And if you can take those and use them to build confidence, whatever you decide to do in your life, you're going to be well equipped, and you're going to be chasing success because that's all you've known for the life that you live now in sports.
I think sometimes it's hard. Probably all the time it's hard when you're still in that position or in that transition to life after sports, so to speak, to not recognize the skills, the life skills that you've learned, to take into business, to take into coaching, to take into writing, right? And we don't know that until later on, and we're so focused on what we're losing, which is the sport, right? Yeah, good. I think we have time for at least one more question.
Hi, I'm a sophomore here on the football team, and my question was, how do you deal with thoughts or ideas about like regret? Maybe you wish things could have gone differently, or you wish you could have gone about things a different way.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. So my question was, how do you deal with thoughts or ideas about regret? Like maybe you wish you could have done things differently, or things could have gone a different way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thoughts about regret? Things could have gone a different way?
I think for me, like telling myself that the only regret I would have in my life is not doing something because I was scared or I wasn't comfortable doing it. Once I get past that and once I do it, there's going to be regret. There's always, it's kind of like that what if, like, man, I regret not getting a little stronger, or I regret not being 6'2" because it would help me, you know, or I regret not having whiter teeth. Like, there's always regret, but like personally, I believe that the only true regret there is not doing something because you're scared or it's the unknown. Like, once you take that step over that, whatever happens, know there's going to be regret, but that's stuff that you can learn from, and that's stuff that when you take into your next chapter, you know, chapter 2 of your life, that you won't make that same mistake because you learned that in chapter 1. Whereas if you don't embark on that journey at all, you'll never know, and you'll never learn, and you'll never grow.
Being an athlete is a life of routine, and a routine is an iterative process. It's constantly changing and updating, and you know, every time you hit that moment and you can kind of look back and understand what about your process maybe you didn't like. Again, you try to fix it, and sometimes you pinpoint the problem in the first try, and sometimes you create more problems. And so I think that iterative process and knowing you're always a work in progress is the best way I ever dealt with, you know, not performing or not doing what I wanted to do and regretting it. Usually just as long as it's never the inputs and what you're bringing to the table, it's always fixable.
Yeah, I would say, you know, regret is just, it's a part of the human experience. We all have regrets. It's something that's very, very universal. Where regret becomes dangerous is when you let regret turn into fear. And when you have those past regrets and you say like, oh, I made this decision and I regret it, so like, I'm not gonna put myself out there anymore. Or like, I'm not gonna take this risk because it's not worth it. Like, the risk isn't worth the regret. But, you know, it's important to understand that everybody experiences regret. It's not a great feeling, but the only way to avoid regrets in the future is to continue to take risks and to put yourself out there and to push yourself. And that's where that, you know, that athlete mentality after college sports really steps in. It's like, you might get knocked down 7 times, but if you get up 8 times, then it's worth those 7 failures or those 7 regrets or whatever negative experiences you have. So not letting regret morph into something more insidious and more dangerous is a key to dealing with it.
Yeah, awesome. Katie, Blaze, Connor, thank you. Appreciate your time, your wisdom, your knowledge. Awesome. Everybody, please. Also, you all know this, as members of teams, there's always the backstage crews, the people that put things on that you never see. There's so many people around here. Please thank everybody as you're walking out of here tonight. But don't walk out. Yep, okay, thank you. Go. Yep. Couple of last housekeeping things here. Katie's book and what she's on tour for here is Surviving the Second Tier. Katie will be out here in the hallway with a book signing, and you can stop by and talk with her, and both Blaze and Connor will be out there as well for you to talk with too. So everybody, thank you for your time. Again, thank you panelists, appreciate it. Thank you.